Hello, everybody. I am today here with Carley Senton. We worked together a few years ago on a project that was to build and implement a forum to support parents affected by child sexual exploitation. It was a good number of years ago now. Carley and I have kept in touch, good friends, still working on various different projects. So this is all going to be about how we use the internet to bring people together, to build communities, to enhance people's experiences, improve people's lives, and help non-profit organizations to enhance their impact. So, Carley, do you want to tell us a little bit about that project? I know it was a number of years ago now, but hopefully it's not too fuzzy in the past. Tell us a bit about the project and your role in it.
Yeah, I think it was 2014 I saw in my old notes. So that's 5 years ago, which is wild. So I was the digital manager for the charity Parents Against Child Sexual Exploitation. And it was a national charity here in the UK that supports families with children who've gone through sexual exploitation outside the home. And this project was funded by the Department for Education here in the UK. So before I came on board into this role, the project had already been proposed with a view to get funding. And what it was all about was trying to connect our service users who are across the country. And we were quite a small charity. I think staff at the time was only somewhere around 15 people, about half of those who were support workers working on phones. We wanted to be able to connect our service users so that they could both offer peer support, but also so that they could connect across a geographic area. So the forum was an idea to do that. And when I came on board, the kernel of how we would do that was there with this online forum through the website, but there hadn't been a lot of engagement yet with the service users. So I just wanted to make sure that when I first came on board, that we made sure the solution that they'd come up with, this idea for a forum, was right to meet that goal of connection.
Sure. Okay, that sounds good. I'm going to go off script a little bit now. I did have some questions prepared for you, but I think you've just talked about the motivations behind the project there and how it came about. And obviously this was a pilot project initially, wasn't it, before it became a quote real project. So I think with it being the topic of CSE is obviously a very sensitive topic, and obviously security would have been high up the agenda list when talking about any kind of project like this. How did you sort of go about navigating that potential minefield of putting people's mind at ease to know that it was a secure and safe space for people to connect?
Yeah, it's a good question, because that was part of the reason why I wanted to engage our service users from the start. I did a lot of external research first, so I was looking at how are other organizations doing it in the third sector, particularly around sensitive topics. So I looked at Macmillan, which does cancer support, and Missing People, which does support for families with missing persons, and looked at how are other people tackling that kind of a challenge. You know, were they doing things publicly or privately? Was it locked down? Could you be anonymous and participate? Because a lot of forum support is often anonymous. It's nice to be able to say whatever you want to say and get the support that you need without really having to censor yourself or worry about what you're saying or how you're coming across when it comes to really sensitive issues. So to tackle it, I started with a bit of a feasibility assessment and survey and interviews with our users. So once I knew a little bit what else was happening in the market around similar ideas, it informed questions I wanted to go talk to our service users about. So spoke to them about, spoke to them first about their current technology use. So what kind of forums were they even familiar with? And were they in Facebook groups or different online forums, or was that kind of use foreign to them? Because you don't want to go into assuming that your service users even would engage in this kind of way online. So did a bit of that and a bit of around, okay, what would make you feel comfortable and confident and trust this system that we might develop for you to have these conversations together. And key around it was anonymity, and was balancing the needs of the organization and what they saw and what they wanted, and sort of concerns that they had in terms of knowing who was participating, and then the needs of the users as well. So there's a lot of chats about, you know, would you participate if it was anonymous or not? And yeah, so I think early on probably had the idea that it was going to have to be a bit of a closed private forum, which is a bit different than most of what I was seeing out there, because it's a barrier, right? And with forums, you want the barriers to be as minimal as possible to get that participation, especially if you've got a bit of a smaller group, which we were anticipating starting with. So we knew that that might be something we'd have to tackle to protect what is such a sensitive life experience that people are going through and talking about.
Sure.
So there's a bit of a balance of us thinking through what would safeguard our users and what we thought might have to happen, and then engagement of them as well to say, what do you need? What would you want to be able to participate?
Yeah. And I mean, what's kind of interesting to me from somebody who works in the technology industry and how we kind of use the kind of systems that are available to us, there is so much, or there are so many options out there. I mean, you've got Facebook closed private groups, could be considered an option. Obviously, you've got forums that you can add to your own website, which is the route that we took in the end. But obviously, there are other platforms as well available out there. Did you do kind of any research into those different options, or was it you wanted to keep people on the PACE website for a particular reason? What was the thinking behind the choice in the software?
So that, again, came out of the investigation. So I was also looking at what platforms others were using, and then looking at what the needs were coming out of our users, which kind of informed the tech spec that I wrote, which was identifying what our security requirements are, what our privacy and registration and login process needed to be like. And then from there, it was taking those requirements and seeing what met them on the market. So I remember off the top of my head that we were looking at Yammer, Facebook groups, and going more integrated with the website through BBPress, I think it was at the time, a forum plugin with our WordPress website. And then it was looking at what control do we have across those. So it was really an exercise, again, of balancing needs. So the pro, say, for example, of a Facebook group is a lot of people are already on Facebook. They know how it works. It's really easy to get on and engage. But then there was much less control we could have over the privacy and the content and the way that conversations sort of thread, that we kind of had to look at what were our must-haves and our desirables, I guess, and how much control we wanted. So in the end, we did decide to go with the plugin integration with the website because it afforded us the most control. And for something, again, in such a sensitive topic, there were concerns from the board as well from a privacy standpoint, because it could be an absolute disaster if some content got out of the forum or leaked out of the forum, because we could be talking about live court cases that can be affected, and what to say nothing of the PR disaster that would have for the charity, but that could devastate people's lives who are actually going through court trying to get justice. So it's not anything. The privacy concerns for us were very top of mind.
Sure.
So that was probably one of the big pushes as to why we went with the technology that we did. But it was not a foregone conclusion. It was an exercise that we did looking at the needs and the tech spec that came out of our investigations.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think it possibly from an economical kind of standpoint, a small charity, integrating a platform in that way that you have full control over is actually more of a cost-effective way of doing it, because I know that some of the platform communities that you can kind of tap into that already exist, particularly now, I'm not sure if it was the case back in 2014, how times have changed, but some of them are really quite expensive to use and they're not hugely customizable. But obviously when it's your own forum on your own website, it's almost like a a room in your own house, so to speak, you can
Yeah.
configure how you want and look after in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
So,
cost was definitely another factor that we looked at within the spec. And I think as well, when it's something that you can control on your own website, so for example, something like Yammer, at the time, Yammer was the kind of social media platform in the Microsoft suite. And now even just the change that that's had over the last 5 years, where it's now much more integrated in with their other services. And it's very feature rich with features that we didn't need at the time. So
yeah,
the way that those products evolve is and the pricing models of them changes. So yeah, the control
yeah.
of your own plugin on a website was a lot
Yeah,
offered a
and I
lot.
think especially, and this does lead into the next question as well, because it was a pilot to begin with. You want to keep those kind of factors under control and keep it as simple as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So it was obviously a pilot project. So you did a lot of research into what that was going to look like by talking to people and making a few decisions based off the back of that. How did you gather feedback on an ongoing basis and integrate that into future developments for the forum? And ultimately, what were the kind of reasons for keeping that space going after the pilot period had ended?
Mm-hmm. So to launch it, I engaged quite heavily with a few service users. It might have been like a small group, maybe up to 10 people, to help sort of seed it and get it off the ground. So it was regular feedback, but it was also just really empowering service users to own it. I ran at one point a sort of a moderator of the week role as well. So we had different permissions, which is another thing that we could set that came out of our tech spec of what we wanted. The ability to assign these roles and have them take a lot of ownership over monitoring and supporting and watching the forum themselves. So there was a lot of very direct ownership from the service users themselves. And then the feedback on top of that was a survey. So it was looking at analytics and qualitative survey data. So looking at how many people signed up from our user base, how many people were actually using it, what were they actually using it for, and what was their subjective reported experience of that. And across the board, it was really positive. Considering, I think to start off with, there was somewhere between, I don't know, maybe about 40 to 50 people. That's not huge in forum terms to keep something alive, but they were a very dedicated group, and it was a tool that actually there was such a gap for and a need for this connection. So the way that they used it was a real success factor. One of our primary goals was to improve the connection of emotional support for peer-to-peer support, and there was that element happening. We also hoped that it could be an organizing platform, which it turned into as well. So for some people, they were able to connect and better able to kind of come together for certain campaigns that we were working on. Some of the content that emerged from it as well, we were able to use for media and other stories, so the reach kind of got bigger and outside of the forum itself. In the survey that we did, our key metric, and it is a kind of qualitative subjective metric, but was important to us, was do you feel less isolated in what you're dealing with? Because that was a big factor in the support that we provided to parents and families, because if the parents are feeling like they don't always get the support that they need from, say, police and social care, and other people outside the family don't understand what's going on with this kind of abuse, it's a very isolating thing, and then your mental energy is depleted, so your support is down. So we really wanted to improve that, and across the board, all the parents said that yes, it was something that had really helped them to feel less isolated. So on those metrics, and some of that's what we were reporting to the Department for Education, our funder, who was interested in the impact this was having, that led us to really just wanting to keep nurturing it, keep trying new things to make sure that it stayed sustained and kept the conversations going.
Yeah, yeah. And you talked about reducing isolation and connecting people. Has there been any instances that you're aware of where people have connected offline or connected, sort of become friends or any activities have happened away from the forum as a result of that online space?
I don't know myself if it's, I couldn't say that there were some that were the direct result of first connecting on the forum. The charity also ran about maybe twice a year, maybe a little bit more, a networking day in person, which was located in different places around the UK. So there were opportunities for people to come and travel if they could, and I think there were some stipends to support the travel as well. So there were other ways that we were trying to build and foster community too.
Yeah.
But something coming out of the forum itself, it wouldn't be something that I quite had access to the data to.
Sure. And it was a while ago.
It was, yeah.
No, that's really good though, and I really like the fact that you integrated the service users from the beginning throughout the process and then afterwards as well. That kind of co-design approach, particularly with something as potentially emotional as this is, I mean, you can't get away with just a top-down, we're just delivering this to you, go and use it kind of thing. You have to involve people in the process, and when you do that, they feel like they're part of that, and they're likely to be more engaged and get a lot more out of it as a result.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of the actual development of that community then, for any other small charities watching, people might want to get involved in doing something like this for their own organization. Do you have any sort of top tips, key takeaways for how people can come up with the idea of producing some kind of online community, and how they may kind of put something like that together, foster its growth and promote it?
Mm-hmm. I think it really is the theme that we've been talking about, which is to engage users. Don't go in assuming that everyone wants to go online or this is the best way to achieve your goal. So first of all, kind of validate the approach and continue to involve them in fostering that ownership of something as you go. So for this, I was very conscious that, particularly in community building, I was more of a facilitator than a leader of it. I wanted to give them the tools to take it and make it their own, because I was not part of this community, but wanted to see it grow. So yeah, I would say don't do it in isolation. I think we got a lot out of the front-loaded work of engagement and defining the technical requirements that we had and what we wanted to see this do, and engaging people to be leaders and champions of it in a way that we wouldn't have if we just were like, well, obviously people want to connect and we'll just give them this online place to go do that, and assume that they will, sort of build it and they will come. Yes. Doesn't necessarily work. Yeah. So that would be my main thing, just being really clear about what the goal is, and then talking to the actual people to say, what is it that you need that would help you with this problem?
Yeah. So facilitate that process rather than try and lead on every aspect of it. In terms of getting sort of buy-in then from colleagues and the higher ups, so to speak, the people with the purse strings, or whether that's the the management or even the funders, have you got any tips for building a case for putting this forward?
Good question, because I came on board when the funder was already on board. That I don't have great tips necessarily for there. We did have some back and forth with our board and our trustees at the time around some of the finer details, because there were a lot of opinions about whether we should allow anonymity and how secure it should be versus not. And I think they in part really looked to me for some guidance and advice on that, actually. So it's just to remember that you are an expert as much as you're coming to facilitate a certain way of achieving something. I knew about what makes a successful forum. I knew to be able to identify challenges like, actually, if you close it off, we're going to have a barrier to entry. So how do we make that minimal, or how do we engage people to get around that, or make our registration process easier, so that we reduce the levels of barriers. So you're going into it with some expertise that should be heard and valued, hopefully. And what I had done was taken the initial research, that external scan of what others were doing, and the engagement of our service users, and packaged it up in a feasibility report that kind of made the case for, yes, this is what we know, and this is why actually this particular solution should have an impact in what we're trying to have an impact towards. So I'm always a big believer in gathering evidence, and whether that's external research or surveys or whatever it might be, but really just, I'm always still a little bit surprised at how much there is in the market of, we think this is the best thing, we think this will work, we think, and if you can just back it up with a bit of evidence as to why you're making those assumptions or why you think, connect that story, connect that thread from problem to journey to outcome.
So, I mean, it sounds to me that the building a case has to be simple to understand. You know, you've got to kind of put this thing together so that people can understand why you're proposing it, but also the outcomes have to be there as well. So it's all about actually understanding what you're going to get out of doing something like this. Because I suppose there's a lot of risk aversion towards investing in something like this, whether it's a new technology for the organization or just a new idea that's going to involve service users in a way that you haven't perhaps done in the past. So it sounds to me like keeping it as simple as possible, using evidence to back up what you're saying, and putting an outcome there as well, so people know what they're going to get out of it. Yeah,
I would agree with that, definitely.
Awesome. I hope so, because you just said it.
I agree with your.
I think you probably said more, but cool. All right. Well, that's all my questions for you, Carley.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for your time. I haven't prepared an outro for this video, but it will be going up on YouTube. This is the first of hopefully a number of interviews with professionals within the third sector like Carley. So subscribe to this channel and look out for more in the future.